Ooh, that's an open one. Good morning. How's everybody this morning? And what a wonderful Mother's Day it is, too, today. And you know, it's interesting that the topic today is building a healing consciousness, because the way that we build a healing consciousness, if we want to get into the perfect healing consciousness, whether we're working with anybody else or whether we're working with ourselves, is love. All we got to do is love. Oh, is that all? Well, what is love? Lots of people have some negative thoughts, and they think, well, I'm not a loving person because I thought this, or I did that, or I said this. Has anybody ever thought that they weren't a loving person because they've done those things? Yeah. And when you tell people that really all you got to do is work at developing love, that's a pretty big word, and that's a real scary thing for a lot of people, because a lot of people say, well, I don't know how to do that. How do I go about doing it? And you know, everybody is looking for one thing to do. Well, there isn't one thing to do. There are millions of things to do. And you're going to say, maybe, well, that's way too much for me to handle. Well, it really isn't. What we want to do is we want to look at that in a different context. And so one of the things I come across here I'd like to open up and read with you is from probably the best book I have ever read about how to develop a loving consciousness. That's not the name of the book, but in this book, the author spends some time talking about the do's and don'ts. And it's really good to know about the do's and don'ts, because it's the do's and don'ts that are the little things that we can practice each and every day. And this is a book from the collection of Edgar Cayce. Some of you may have read his work. He was known as a sleeping prophet. And there's about 35 or 40 books that were published on his works, and I've read most of them over the years. But this one is my favorite of all-time books, of his book, and one of my most favorite books. It's on the story of attitudes and emotions. And he says that love is God's law. We can only possess that which we freely give. So that in order to become love, or more godlike, which is all giving, we must give that which is God, again, love. The essential key to this is forgiveness. In our opinion, forgiveness and love are inseparable within the creative scheme of the soul's experience. So there we are. He starts out talking about love and forgiveness. And forgiveness is one of the key elements that we need to work with to advance ourselves in any way or any activity or any day. We have to be able to forgive. And this really doesn't have to do as much with other people. Okay, yeah, everybody has little resentments or things like that that you've had to deal with over the years, and we know that we've got to forgive people. And one of the things that a lot of people tell us, that when we got to forgive someone, we got to love them. Actually, the truth of the matter is, we don't. We don't have to love them. In fact, we don't even have to like them. Isn't that nice? However, we must be willing to release any negative feelings or any negative thoughts that we have towards anyone or anything. And being neutral is okay. If you could learn to like them, that's fine, or learn to love them, that's fine, but not necessary. Oh, I love that terrible experience I had. Oh, it was wonderful. No, it wasn't. I didn't like it at all, but I got to release the energy I got around that in order to advance myself. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether it's person, place, or thing. If we don't release that energy, we continue to have the same experience. My brother quite often goes down into Montana and that, and there's a few other places in the States, but not much. But he says, yeah, you know, the people down there aren't very friendly at all. He says, they're miserable. I'm sure glad to get home after I go there. I go for a little visit. The people in Montana just aren't friendly. Anna and I, we have a different experience. We figure that people are friendly, and that's all we ever run across is friendly people. You're always going to come across the people that you have in your consciousness, because the people in your consciousness are a direct reflection of self. Now, the start here to develop a loving consciousness comes from the great teacher and the greatest of them all, was Jesus. And in Matthew chapter 22, verse 36 to 40, he stated, when asked, Master, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. Okay? So he's talking about we've got to be centered in that spiritual context in order to generate that feeling of love and to bring it up. And then he said, that is the first and great commandment. And the second is likened unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the laws and the prophets. And after he left, St. Paul went around, and in Romans 13, 9, 10, he said, when he's speaking to the Romans, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Loveth worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. But the key thing is, love thy neighbor as thyself. And you may say, you don't know what my neighbor is like. I don't have to know what your neighbor is like. I just have to know what kind of experience and how you're dealing with your neighbor. And then I know not only what the neighbor is like, I also know what the individual is like. Because we can only see in other people what we see in ourselves. We can only experience the love of other people and the giving of love to other people as we can in ourselves. So often, when I'm doing classes and workshops, I have people say to me, oh, I love my children way more than I love myself. Or I find it easier to love my husband or my partner or my family more than I love myself. That is the first great big lie that we tell, because that is a lie. Why? Well, I'll tell you why it's true and why it's a lie. Why it's a lie is because love is a feeling. And there's only one place that you can have a feeling, that's within inside yourself. I can't have a feeling out there. No matter what you want. Sometimes I'd like to have them out there so they're not in here. But you can only have a feeling inside yourself. So, we'll come back to that. The other part where you say, people say, I could love my children more than myself. It's only in the head that you can do that. And you could do that through a process of logic, reasoning, and analysis. And you could convince yourself intellectually and emotionally or mentally that that is correct. And you could be absolutely right in the head. But love isn't a head thing. Have you ever noticed that? It's kind of like a feeling thing. And you can't have a feeling anywhere inside yourself. So your love of anybody or anything is limited to the capacity of being able to experience that within yourself. And the more you experience it within yourself, the more that you could bring it out here and share with other people, which you do anyhow. You cannot afford to hang on to any resentment or animosity towards anybody or towards yourself, because you're limited on the love that you can give to the people that are in your life. Plus that, you know, have you ever noticed that we always take out what we're feeling on the people around us and the people that care about us. You don't stop strangers on the street when you're having a bad day and unload on them just because they're going by and you don't want to do it to somebody you know. It's always somebody you know you unload on. Is this true? Yeah. And so if we want to be a better custodian of our relationships, then the place to start is within ourselves. We've got to build our capacity to love ourselves. That's why Louise Hay states, I love and approve of myself exactly as I am. Because if you can accept yourself the way you are, good, bad, and indifferent, which they're all there, then you can change. But if we can't accept ourselves the way we are, then it's really hard to change. It's self-acceptance. And when we accept ourselves unconditionally the way we are, and there's that word unconditional, then we can move forward. And so the biggest job of forgiveness that we have is to forgive ourselves on an ongoing basis. And that's all that mind chatter that we have that isn't at the highest spiritual place. It's all those things that we do that we know we shouldn't have done or we could have done better, and not beating ourselves up on it. It's looking at the person in the mirror and developing an intimate relationship with that person and really loving who and what you see. Try it. If you want to try that, hey, I'll give you one to try. I love and approve of myself exactly as I am. Spend 5 minutes every morning and 5 minutes every evening for the next month, just standing, looking at the mirror, going over that affirmation and over for just 5 minutes, twice a day, 10 minutes. That will bring you more awareness than a whole lot of other things that you got going in your life. Guaranteed 100%. Okay? And that's the place to start moving forward. And then they say, oh, well, unconditional love. Whoa, but you don't know what kind of an issue I'm dealing with. Yes, I do, both from dealing with them and being one of those that was dealt with. I was one of those issues that people had to deal with. And my mother, God bless her, taught me what unconditional love really means. And unconditional love is separating the person from the problem, loving the person, and dealing with the problem. And in all the work I do with families that got chaos and confusion, where there's young people and adults doing, the greatest chore I've got is to be able to get the parents to separate the two. Because dealing with the problem sometimes means that you've got to draw a line in the sand. Okay? And if you love the person, you'll do it. And then there's all the other buts that come along with that. But we have to get off our butts and do something, or else we're going to be in trouble. And then we just love that person. My mother had no frame of reference at all, born in a small town, Exshaw, grew up there all her life, had no frame of reference for what I was into at all. She didn't understand it, couldn't comprehend it, she knew it wasn't good, she knew it was bad, and it was very clear with her that she loved me and kept that door open. However, she didn't appreciate my activities. And I was very clear that that was where she was coming from. And so she taught me what unconditional love means and how to go about it. So separate the person from the problem, love the person, and deal with the problem. And you got to keep the two separate, because loving that person is a feeling thing. Dealing with the problem is really establishing some clear boundaries and limits and sticking with them. Tough to do. God only knows it's one of the toughest things in the world to do when you're dealing with troubled people. But that's the key. And so what I like about building a healing consciousness and that story of attitudes and emotions, in there Edgar Cayce talks about what love isn't and what love is. And so those are the things. The isn't are the things that we want to work on to make sure that we're not doing. The things that is are the things that we want to work on to help build that healing consciousness. You're not going to go to a course and get it. You can forget it. It's not something that happens overnight. It's a lifetime journey, and it grows with increments. It grows with little steps. It's not the big steps. You don't get to make a big step until you made all the little steps to get you there. So it's the little steps that build a healing consciousness. And I got to say, this is probably my favorite reading that I've ever come across on love. So, these are the knots. Love is not this. These are the things that we want to work on to make sure that we're not doing and that we release and let go. Love is not being possessive or jealous. It's not being possessive or jealous. There's nothing to be jealous about, and there's nothing to be possessive about, because we don't own anybody. We have a hard enough time owning ourselves, never mind anybody else. We don't own anybody, so there's no need to be possessive. I was just talking with someone the other day that was going through an issue, and I said, well, you got to let them go, because that's what love is. Love is letting go. And if they come back to you, they're yours, and if they don't, they never were in the first place. Okay? Love is not a business. What do we mean a business? It's not a negotiation. I'll love you if you do this. I'll love you if you do that. Has anybody ever heard or done that one? It's not a business. It's not a negotiating tool. It's something that we do without making a contract on it. Love is not saying, after all I've done for you. How could you? Well, that's the end of it. But has anybody ever said, after all I've done for you? Or has anybody ever had that done to them? Oh, I've had a few times. Or the other one, how could you do this to me? How could you do this to me? That's not what I taught you. No, that's right. Love is not demanding more than another can freely give. It takes time for someone to give freely and to move forward. It's not something that happens right away. It's something that we learn in increments. It's taking a step at a time towards that. Love is not feeling superior to any other being. Easy to do sometimes, but sometimes that's hard to do when we're going down the street and we see a street person and we have a judgment. This is judgment, by the way. Huh? Judgment. Some of the greatest people that are some of the greatest spiritual people that claim to be get outside their philosophy, and the first thing they get into is the poor soul, they're lost. If only they would come over here, they'd find their way. Excuse me, folks, we've got out of what we're trying to learn right now, and we got into judgment. There are many paths that lead to the destination, which is spiritual understanding and awareness. And nobody's got the market on it. We even don't. So love is not sitting in judgment. Love is not being intolerant of self. Okay, we've got to learn to tolerate ourselves and accept the fragility of the journey of life, that we're going to make mistakes, we're going to browbeat. However, we don't want to allow that to justify doing what we're doing neither. Well, you know, I was at a talk the other day and they said, don't be intolerant of yourself, so I'm doing this, trying not being intolerant of myself. Not quite. Love is not condemning self. You know, what an idiot, bonehead, dummy, stupid, not important, worthless, useless, never amount to nothing. Do I need to go on? I don't think so. We're going to leave that one alone. Love is not justifying yourself. I always teach this in my program about no justifying, especially about feelings. Do you know why you have feelings, certain feelings? No. You just have them. If you could get somebody that gave you the market on why you have feelings, then you could get a little dial to control and not to control. I think I'll turn my feeling meter up today so I can have all kinds of new experience. I'll turn it down because I don't want nothing today. I don't know why I have feelings. I can't justify my feeling. I have a feeling. However, what I can do is learn to express it appropriately. okay, in a giving way. Love is not being a doormat. And you know, one of the worst things about our wonderful teaching is we create more sophisticated doormats. And how we do it is when someone is, in our experience, perhaps being inappropriate or saying something we don't agree with and we have a little reaction, rather than addressing it and talking about it, we have a tendency to say to ourselves, well, that's their problem, I'm going to just let it go. Has anybody ever done that? That's their problem, I'm going to just let that go. Okay? And then it happens again somewhere else down the line and all of that kind of stuff. No, that we need to be able to stand up for ourselves and be willing to express how we're feeling about any situation. And then the other thing, well, you don't understand my situation. In my program, I teach people how to express their feelings appropriately. It took me 11 and a half years to make the transition from gang life into regular life without that anger and rage ruling me, to get into a more peaceful place. And the system I teach people is how to go back after the fact and express themselves from a position of power, not pain. Okay? I remember having a corporate executive on my program one time, and he had an issue with checkout girls. And I sent him back a half a dozen times to grocery stores and other stores to find the checkout girl and to go over to her and express how he really felt in an appropriate way. Oh my God, I couldn't do that. Well, yeah, you can, if you want to move beyond. And you want to move beyond that stuff that's inside. You can do that. Love is not being permissive and allowing things to happen and brushing them off that are really an offense to you or not in your framework or your mindset. So that's what a lot of things that we could stop doing. Did anybody get a few tips out of there for themselves? Oh good, that's good. Yeah. It's not just me that needs to pay attention to that then. So those are the don'ts. Now, here's the do's. And I always say consciously practice a spiritual connection with everything you do in each part of the day. So like when I go out into the mountains hiking, no matter where I go, whether I'm by myself or with a group of people, I always do a little prayer and a little spiritual connection. I dwell in the bright Christ light, only goodness is attracted to me. Thank you, Brother Bear, Brother Wolf, and Brother Eagle for sharing your home with me today. So I don't really care what anybody thinks about that. I do that, and if I forget to do that out loud with my grandchildren, they make me do it. Well, they don't. They bring it up. Papa, are you going to say the prayer today? Because they want to feel comfortable, and they know that that is good. Okay? So every morning, my favorite time, I walk 18 blocks into work every morning, virtually every morning, and on that way, because I go real early, it's my time to just stay connected. And every day, before I go in to make a presentation, to teach a class, before I come here, all the time, I always do the same treatment. I've been doing it for 25 years, and that just connects me with what I'm going to do. So use the spiritual activities, not just because you want a house or a car, but use it on a daily basis to connect spiritually all your activities. And believe me, over a period of time, you'll see that you've got a greater flow there. Sometimes it's hard to see God in all in everything that exists, but that's what moves us out of judgment, is to know that this life, this person, this experience is part of the physical realm, and everything's spirit in one way or another. And that doesn't mean that we have to say, oh, well, this is for me. No, it may not be. But just know that there's something else going on there in the bigger picture that we may not know. And we can choose not to be part of it. That is perfectly fine. not a problem. But as soon as we have it, and I'm going to negate that with a but, as soon as we have a judgment on it, then we make that part of our consciousness because we draw it in. Love is being a light of love to others. Being a light of love to others, so that your mannerisms and how you conduct yourself inspires other people. Okay? And you say, well, I got nothing to inspire other people with. I'm just a nobody. Not true. That's the one thing that we all got to let go. We are all somebody. We're a living expression, and we have the right to express this life the way we choose. And so, let's choose this day to be a light of love for others and to work at it. I remember when I started making my transition. And one of the motivating factors, the key factors, is I did not want my children going down the path I did. I just didn't want it. It was too destructive. So what am I going to do? Am I going to stand there and tell them not to do it after I've done it? Don't work. Okay? I've seen it before. Don't smoke. Don't drink. And people are smoking and drinking that are telling me that. Okay? So what I realized is that was hypocrisy for me. So what I realized, if I don't want my children to do that, then I've got to show them how to be instead of tell them how not to be. And that was one of the motivating factors for me to be able to advance myself and to make the change, was that desire not to have my children do what I did and to know the right way to do that. And believe me, it worked. And I do that with the grandchildren now, and there's even some refinements that I've had to do that I didn't know I had to do with the children, with the grandchildren. For example, finding somebody sitting in my seat at a hockey game or a football game and showing them how to deal with it the right way, which is going to get the usher or security. Not the old way, which was, I will deal with this myself. Okay? Hard doing it different, but you know what? It's worthwhile because I walked out feeling I did it the right way, and it made me feel good. And that good feeling permeates into the experience. Love is given completely with no strings attached. Oh, I'll love you if. Giving completely. A lot of people consider themselves to be great givers. However, I would challenge everybody to fine-tune the giving. Giving means no attachment at all to how it is received or whether it's not received at all. Our job as a giver is to give. The gift, once it leaves our hand, doesn't matter what the receiver does. That's none of our business. Wow, you think they could have been at least a little grateful and said thank you. Then you're not giving. I didn't even hear from them. That's not giving. They just took it and gave it to somebody else. That's not giving. Giving, and whatever they do with it, is their business. It's got nothing to do with me. My job as a giver is to give freely. And so love is giving without any strings attached in anything. Because if not, it's not really giving. Don't fool yourself. Okay? Because life is circulation and flow, and we've got to learn to be good givers for our own sake. Okay? You need a little practice at it. Just watch the next time you're in a situation like that and somebody doesn't appreciate it or somebody tries to say no. Sometimes I've taken people out for lunch and they said, oh no, and I said, just say thank you, God. That's all you got to do. On the other hand, if I'm a receiver, what if I don't want it? Well, say thank you and pass it on. We're like a clearinghouse at our place. Huh? We get all kinds of people give us stuff. And lots of it we don't even have a use for. I have clothes that don't fit me and hopefully never will. I'd be a little bit anorexic then. You know, and stuff like that. And so we just gratefully accept it, process it, and pass it on. Has anybody ever been offended? Yes. But that's their problem, not mine. It's not Anna's problem, it's their problem. And if they tell me they're offended, then they're in for a lesson on giving. Because I'm going to tell them, you didn't really give that to me. Have I done it? Yes. And after a little conversation, they calm down. Loving is putting others first. And that doesn't mean at the expense of self. Don't hear that. In any interaction, think about what that person needs from coming to you or talking to you. Don't think about your own position. Think about what is it that they're asking me? What is it their need? And how can I fulfill that? Not at selling out on your integrity or anything like that. Don't hear that. Not at selling out yourself. But thinking about that request first before you come from your position. Love is allowing others complete freedom to be themselves. Oh, that can open you up for a lot of stuff. That doesn't mean that you don't have healthy boundaries and limits. You could be yourself and do your own thing. However, that doesn't fit in this framework, so I'm going to have to ask you to step outside of it. Be real clear. Okay? But you've got to allow people the freedom to be themselves. First thing is with kids, you see. A lot of people think they have control over kids, and that lasts for about a week, maybe 2. And then the child is in control, whether you know it or not. If you're big enough to look at it, you see that. Love is accepting others as they are, not how we would like them to be. That doesn't got anything to do with what they're doing. Okay? It's got to do with them. And of course, we always see people from the point of the highest and best that we hope for them. However, sometimes that just doesn't work right away. Love is sharing, filling each other's cup, filling the other's cup. So we give that positive feedback, that positive support, give those ideas, whether they listen to you or not. I remember when I went to Red Deer and opened my church, one of the most frustrating things was working with people for a couple of 3 years, and they just quite weren't getting it, and then they come down to Calgary and take a seminar and they go, "You wouldn't believe what I learned." Yeah, I've been telling you for 3 years. And you know, at first I took it personally. Until I got clear that when I was taking it personally, I was attached to their outcomes. I wasn't doing what my job is. My job isn't to help them get it. My job is to prepare the soil. Help them prepare their mind, so when the seed is right and the soil is right, the seed grows and they get it. So I just help prepare the way with them. It's not my job to help them get it. That'll happen when it happens and where it happens. And that still happens all the time now, and I just smile. Love is attempting to give what is best needed by another individual, saying or doing the right thing at the right time and place. And sometimes saying the right thing at the right time and place may not always be received as being helpful at the time. In fact, when people come on my program, I'm always giving them feedback, and they don't really like it a lot of the times. Okay? Because it's true. Sometimes we don't like that stuff. However, when we're moving forward, it's the dislike sometimes that we have to look at. Love is praying that God's will be done through others, even if it hurts you in the outcome. So we want them to do the right thing for themselves, but it may not be what we want for ourselves. But we've got to help them with that. I remember one time, more than one time, I've counseled young ladies who have become in the family way, and they don't know what to do. and they're looking for an authority to tell them what to do. And I don't do that and didn't do that. What I do is present the scenarios and help them get to a point where they're emotionally able to accept whatever decision they make. Not my job to do that. Love is accepting the fact that others may hate you for doing what you know is right and proper. People do get upset with you. Love is being able to stand knowing the truth about yourself and others. Tough one. Love is being able to bear witness for whatever you have asked for. So, for example, if you really ask for someone's opinion about you, then you have to accept what it is that they say, whether you agree with it or not. Has anybody ever been, well, what do you think of me? Has anybody ever been asked that question? And you're going, oh my God, what a loaded question. Yeah, well, love is being God's will on earth, being true to yourself and your inner guidance, knowing that one can and should be a channel for the creative force. Love is being of service, which is giving. It's being a good example to the children of the earth, for what children need are more good examples and fewer critics. It's being able to stand up and speak out for what one firmly believes in. Love is also being humble. It's having faith and trust. It's being able to admit to self and others that you are wrong and made a mistake, and with sincerity. Oh, it's called eating humble pie. Anybody had to do any of that? I could tell you all the flavors, all the brands, and all the sizes. Love is being sorry enough to never want to do wrong again. Love is going to someone you've wronged and truly asking for forgiveness. That takes a big person to do that. Love is being so that others will find us easy to forgive. And the greatest of them all is this one. And Lord only knows that's where I need a lot of work. It's called patience, patience, patience. So I want to close in telling you a little story about a mother, because this is Mother's Day, who in my opinion had a healing consciousness. And you ask yourself, does unconditional love really work? Anybody ever wondered whether it really works or not? I get people to work with it all the time in particularly tacky situations. And what I tell them is, I can't guarantee you that it will work. However, I can guarantee you that it can work. And there is a possibility that it will work. And right now, this looks like it's your only alternative. It's practicing that. And it's a story about a young man that had gone on a rampage with alcohol abuse and drug abuse. And his life had swirled into a dark abyss, especially with the drugs. Started with the small stuff but got into the harder stuff. And then there he was. He was a 23-year-old young man, and he ended up with crystal meth addiction. Some will tell you that's one of the toughest ones of all of them. And not only was he doing crystal meth, he was using the needle. So when you get into that and using the needle, your life expectancy takes a serious nosedive. There was a morning when he woke up into a dark, dingy situation, a room with the light just coming through, and around him were all the evidence of quite a party that had gone on the night before. All kinds of needles and paraphernalia, even some leftover drugs. And the young man looked at this and knew that he had disgraced himself and dishonored himself, and he dishonored his friends and disgraced his friends, and he'd honored and disgraced his family. And that young man went through a process of debilitating himself for what he had become, and a process of justification and rationalization where the best thing that he could do in his life right now was to end it all. If he ended it all, he could step out of the shame and take that shame away from everybody else. And so he decided that that's what he was going to do, and he mixed up an overdose in the needle and was about to take it on when he had a spiritual experience. Didn't know it at the time, didn't know what it was, and didn't know for many more years after that. But in that darkness, this voice said, "But your mother loves you." You see? But your mother loves you. And she did, unconditionally. And you see, in that darkness and in that moment, that voice spoke, and that young man couldn't take his life. So that was my mom, and that was my experience, and that was the first time I heard the voice. And so when you're on your journey, I always remember that unconditional love, which is loving the person and dealing with the problem, may be the only opportunity that you have to make a difference. I can't guarantee you that it will, but I can tell you that the possibility exists. So I want to close, if I can ever find it, with one of my favorite poems right in here. And it's about that. Because what happened that day to me was something I never understood for many years to come. That voice was what I call the touch of the Master's hand. And the Master comes to each and every one of us. So this is called the touch of the Master's hand. And this is mine, for me, and for my mother. 'Twas battled and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. "What am I bidding, good folks?" he cried. "Who'll start the bidding for me? $1, $1, then $2, only $2, $2. Who'll make it $3? Going for $3, but no." From the room far back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bow. Then wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening the loosened strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as a caroling angel sings. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, with a voice that was quiet and low, said, "Now, what am I bid for the old violin?" And he held it up with a bow. $1,000. Who'll make it 2? 2,000. Who'll make it 3? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice. Going, gone, cried he. The people cheered, but some of them cried, "We do not understand what changed its worth." Quick came the reply, "The touch of the Master's hand." And many a man with life out of tune and battled and scarred with sin is auctioned cheap to a thoughtless crowd, much like the old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once and going twice. He's going and almost gone. But the Master comes, and the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of the Master's hand. And so it is.